Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. For the month of April, these are the ideas that we covered, and so this is a summary of the magazine for the month of April. The first was what I called a template for overcoming Western dominance, and this is a study of what deep seek means for Africa. The second was an NFX piece on the return of the customer by James Correa. The third is a media kit for Intersection Magazine. And the fourth is what I called a new learning paradigm. As usual, I feature Founders Freedom Supplement, which is basically 2 pages covering what Founders Freedom does. This is part of a partnership that I'm with them in. Founders Freedom is based in Kenya. And what they do is they help companies work around the design and organization of structures that help them manage succession. This is an area or need that we've recognized in business in many of our African founders, and that Founders Freedom is working to solve. So once again, thank you for listening, thank you for subscribing, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So as usual, I normally like to start by letting you know some of the subjects or some of the programs that we have available at Intersection Magazine and of course at Hope First Enterprises. Hope First Enterprises is what you'd call the umbrella body of covering the whole gamut of what we do here. So in one of the branches, we have what I call Hope First Media, which covers technology, training, or rather web design, web hosting, as functions of Hope First Media. So we teach some of the ideas or some of the things that we do. That means web design as well as web hosting. Most people will teach you how to design web pages, but we like to give you kind of like an overview of what it takes to be in the business, which means you should be able to know what it takes. So how to host your clients. What we normally do is we'll help you get in touch or connect with resellers. These are guys who give you space. So say they charge you maybe $3 a month. It's up to you to charge 4 or 5. So you make your money based on how much extra you charge your client for hosting. Of course, the other thing that you have to think about is customer support. So some of these services or resellers come with 24-hour customer support. If you're doing the design and the hosting part, then that's pretty much you interacting with the host, because not all your clients will know what they need in terms of support. So we teach you the design as well as the hosting. And in terms of the design, we start from super basic to a little bit more complex with what they call first principles. Normally that involves a bit of HTML, JavaScript, and then cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets are really cool because what they let you do is organize the look and the feel of your page from one little small section. Then, of course, there's what they call what you see is what you get designers, or those are pretty much a page that you're given that allows you to look at the design part and the code part, where you put an image, you put text, and then the system designs or puts the code together for you. The final part is where you have what they call content management systems, and these are based on databases. So they're inbuilt systems that help you work sometimes with templates. And what happens with these is you are allowed to access different free or paid for platforms or templates that you can redesign for your client. So you save yourself the hustle of doing too much presentation and too much back and forth in terms of your choice of design. So what you have to do is have an interaction with your client in terms of what are the colors they want to represent for their business, the general look and feel. Are they an NGO? Are they a business? Are they a bakery? You know, what kind of work are they doing? And then create a design that suits them. The second part that we normally cover is, of course, talking about the inside or inside this issue. So, as I mentioned before, the return to the customer, a media kit, and then the template for overcoming Western dominance. Now, for this piece, I used a conversation that was started by Nancy Kacungira. Nancy Kacungira is a Ugandan who is now a voice for the BBC. She's a news presenter and correspondent. And what she was doing was she was kind of trying to describe what DeepSeek means for, say, an artist in the third world. And so she put together a story which I found on X or on Twitter, if you prefer. And when I put this together, I was able to pick up some important points which I think are worth mentioning. So first, she describes a fictional person called Mariam. Then she defines what DeepSeek was and why is it a breakthrough. Then she describes what artificial intelligence models do. Then she connects what all of this means for the person that she described as Mariam, in terms of what it means for cutting costs and making it simpler for her to present her art. So I use all these ideas that she's presenting to start the conversation about DeepSeek and what it means for Africa. And in my sense, for her, or what Nancy was trying to say is the approach for an artist using a tool that makes it easier for her to interact with her audience. What I wanted to do was bring together the idea that DeepSeek represents at least what we've been told on the surface in terms of how much affordable it was for them to come up with this system. If you listen to media and other analysts, they're arguing that there's a possibility that China is not telling us the full story. But in terms of what happened to the markets, because a lot of us, you want to listen to the pundits, but what's more important is that you watch the markets in terms of how the ground shook when DeepSeek was released and how the reverberations were felt throughout with people like NVIDIA, because the price of chips, some of these companies and their success is based on what they're doing in the chip space. So when DeepSeek came out and it was so affordable in terms of what they spent to put it out there and its capabilities, the jump affected the market. So what I wanted to do is I remembered a story. I remembered first about India and what India did when they made some breakthroughs in space. India, for example, spent about 1.6 billion for its space program in comparison to 27 billion that the US spent for its space program. Now, of course, you can also look at, for example, the figures that maybe people like SpaceX spent and how so much innovation has gone into the SpaceX system. But SpaceX presents a different story because this is arguably something that's going on in the first world. But India and China, in my conversation here, represent a conversation we have to have because the Chinese, through DeepSeek, went into an artificial intelligence industry that's been dominated predominantly by the West, and they cut down the cost of putting out a product. And the same thing happened with India. So in this article, I'm really just making a case for how Africa or the third world can take advantage of innovation and smart developers to break into markets that are traditionally dominated by the West. So that's the heart or at the core of that article. And the Founders Freedom piece, which I cover on page 9 and 10, it's really just a discussion on what services they offer, What are your business needs? This involves a consultation. Issues about strategy and governance. And then, of course, a bigger definition of what Founders Freedom is in terms of their mission and their vision. Then they break down their services, as well as, of course, talk about what it involves when you have a board and the board is formed. For those of you who are in the startup space or who wish to get into the small and medium enterprise space and to raise funding, one of the key ideas that you have to be familiar with is you need to have a board supporting the work that you do, or supporting you in terms of governance. That makes you more investment worthy. So I'd encourage you to find a way to engage with Founders Freedom, at least in that regard. We also have our alert consulting publications, which were put together from the work of my dad, my late dad. One of them is a glossary of technical terms and acronyms, as well as a survival kit for communication. For those of you who are interested in this podcast, for example, we've given you the costs for an ad, which is about $25 for 15 seconds. Sponsorship of 12 episodes costs you about 300 USD. What that means is we allow you to have a voice in a theme that covers 3 months, which is a good amount of time for you to grab the attention of those that are faithful as listeners and who might come across the podcast and hence subscribe to your products. If you're not really in the technology innovation space and you're more looking for spiritual ideas, especially centering around the Christian faith, we've created a podcast just for you. This is the Transformation, Transition, and Radical Thinking podcast. Now, that one is also designed for those that are in the writing space, that are Christians that are writing Christian books, or that faith-based books, or Christian writers who are in other fields, but that their thinking and their faith is determining what they write. So that's for you. We've also given you the costs of our web design and hosting, as well as giving you a rough idea how we design or how we interact with our clients. On page 14, we continue a piece we started in the month of March. And this is a discussion about the return of the consumer. And the author says on why it's been so hard since 2014. This is really a discussion of the challenges that new businesses face when they deal with incumbents. They talk about the idea that incumbents have defensibilities, and of course we went to great lengths to define what these defensibilities are, or these moats are. And then we also talked about how incumbents, or here the author talks about how incumbents own or have clogged the growth channels. I think those of you who are listening to what's going on in the modern day of technology are familiar with a calling system that was called Skype. What you find sometimes bigger companies do is they buy the small companies, they absorb them into their bigger machinery, probably mine them for their intellectual property content, recreate products that are more familiar to their audiences, and then later on abandon the product that they bought, which is what I believe has happened in the case of Skype. This is a point that he mentions, I suppose, in point 5, where he says incumbents will actively copy or block any startup that gets momentum. Then he also mentions that incumbents are also in a position to where they can determine the laws that will be passed and the laws that will favor them as incumbents in their prospective fields. While electric state hasn't gotten too much support in terms of critics, I think it still represents some ideas that are crucial in understanding the fears that are out there in terms of what will happen with robotics and intellectual property or artificial intelligence. There's a belief that at some point robots, autonomous computing is going to become is going to get a sense of sentience, or it's going to have independent will. And so these are the ideas that I think are tackled in Electric State, and it's funny, but also gets you thinking about the state of things. Now, in our final summary of our books by Farouk Khailan, with those of you who are part of the first cohort, we present his book on networking, which covers an intro, foundations of effective networking, preparing for success, listening and engaging, the use of digital platforms for networking, using events for networking, networking with high-profile individuals. I would add networking with high net worth individuals as well, nurturing and maintaining relationships, emotional intelligence, networking for entrepreneurs. I think this is crucial to determine what kind of networking you're going to be involved in based on what you're doing, overcoming challenges, networking in a global arena, the power of giving, networking etiquette and professionalism. This involves quite a number of ideas, including not just knowing when to share your business cards, knowing when not to ask for money. Some people actually suggest that instead of asking for money, ask questions, and the people that you ask those questions will be more willing to answer those questions and facilitate you to get that information than they will be if you ask them for money instead. We also have our 4-month summary, which we cover what we've been through the last 4 months. So those of you who've missed out are free to use this for the purposes of subscription or to request a back catalog. And then I found a piece that suggested some high income skills that you can get involved with. This was found on the internet. This involves things like coding, graphic design, web development, public speaking, content marketing, mobile application, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and other ideas. So if you want to find something to do on the side or some place to improve your skills as well as earn, page 21 is for you. Sometimes when you're interacting with other people or submitting jobs or applying for jobs, you'll come across requests for information. In this case, someone asked me for a media kit, so I thought, hey, why don't I put together a media kit for my podcast as well as for the magazine? And so I used a template for one of the ideas that are important when you're putting together a media kit. And so that's what I put together for this magazine. And so those of you who are interested might benefit from that as well, and those who want our services. Now, another new idea, or another idea that I was thinking about for the month of April, was what I called incentive-based learning. I've seen this in some circles, whether that means MOOCs. Those were popular in 2010, between 2010 and 2020. But now you're seeing a lot of people, especially in crypto, saying we'll pay you to learn. So I think that's the new paradigm, where companies are realizing that the customer really has always been king. And so how can we get our tools, our system in the right hands? And we're willing to pay top dollar for these people to use our systems because they have become our top influencers. So I give you some samples of that. For example, in the crypto space, where you're going to be allowed to earn specific coins or get credits for using specific products and learning about certain tools. And then the company benefits, but you benefit as well. There's also micro poetry, which was inspired by people in the Ugandan community. And so what I wanted to do was to, in a sense, have a diary of thoughts, which I will later on compile into some kind of anthology, where I will not necessarily write you a book, about what I went through, but I'll give you poems and I'll leave the rest for you to put those together like a puzzle. Finally, just some updates about our success as Hope First Bakery. For those of you who are interested in our services, we're doing some expansion, and so that's what we covered in the month of April. If you have, or if you need any more information, please be sure to look us up on our pages. That's TERSECTION or Tersection MAG, Tersection Mag. That's on X, or Hope First on X as well. You can DM me and we can talk in terms of the services that you require. In the meantime, thank you for listening and thank you for subscribing, and we look forward to getting you on more content and serving you better.
Intersection Magazine Podcast.